The Big Ten has announced who its new commissioner will be. You'll know that former Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren announced that he will be departing to take on president of football operations, I believe, or president at the Chicago Bears, because, I mean, who passes up that job? But the vacancy left us all asking who could be next. And that ends up being Tony Petitti, who, frankly, has a resume that says, oh, yeah, this is a home run hire. And I'm going to get into the history of what this is a little bit later on. But the point here is he's the guy that created a super alliance in the 1990s. We're going to dig into that. He also ran Activision Blizzard there for a little while, which made Call of Duty and Overwatch, among other things. If you're not into esports gaming, just means that you're a boomer. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just means you're a boomer. He also ran as president, ran the MLB network for 12 years. So he's got a Major League Baseball background, a programming background in college football that we'll get into. But I thought it was more interesting that his dad is an NYPD cop, or was in a NYPD cop. He played baseball at Hereford College, graduated Harvard Law. And I thought this quote from American Athletic Conference Commissioner kind of nails it when describing Petitti. He has a quiet manner. He's quietly effective. He doesn't showboat. I think he'll fit the Big Ten culture very well. Now, I'll read shade into that, but that's because I'm me. Maybe Big Ten folks don't read shade into that at all. Being called, quiet, effective, doesn't showboat. Sounds like 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but hey, that's getting it done. So who is Tony Petitti in regard to college football? Well, actually a very big deal, right? So story time. Former ACC commissioner Gene Corrigan had sketched out what would it take for get a number one team versus number two team in something like a national championship game in college football in the early 1990s on a napkin. What came out of that is what we know of as the Bowl Alliance. Now, what was cool about the Bowl Alliance is that it achieved its goal, right? Get number one to play number two for a national championship in said bowl, right? With Fiesta, Orange, Cotton, whatever it might be. It's also really interesting that the Bowl Alliance was formed without the Big Ten and without what was then the Pac-10, which means that Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State for that matter, USC, UCLA, none of those were in it at a time when those teams were really good and everybody would have liked to see them play inside of, what many of us believe to be a really great model, or the best model to date at the time, to distinguish who is an undisputed national champion. One of the things that I personally don't like about the sport, but is the sport, is that we can have multiple national champions. And I'm just going, man, one for all. And you know what? Tony Petitti agreed with me. So when he was the vice president of programming at ABC, one of the things that he wanted to do was get the Big Ten and the Pac-10 to buy into something like the Bowl Alliance model. And what he came up with was the BCS. Now, what was cool about this is, as vice president of programming at ABC, he also understood what it would take to get the Big Ten, the Pac-10 to throw in their lot with the Bowl Alliance, but also what it would take to get the bowls on board with something like the Bowl Championship Series. In 2006, he told the LA Times, to be honest, we didn't have a plan in mind, but we knew what we wanted, a system that would guarantee matching number one and number two in a championship game at the end of the season, right? And at the time, ABC had rights to the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl. CBS had rights to the Orange and the Fiesta Bowl. And, this is where we get into the Super Bowl Alliance. Separate those two terms so that, they're not Super Bowl in the NFL. You get it. But one of the things that was really hanging in the balance there is whether or not the Orange Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl would end up with champions, right? Because if you got conference champions that aren't playing in your bowl games, really does not put value into your bowl game. So one of the things he also came up with was we would rotate the bowls for the national championship game like we do now, so that the Fiesta, the Orange, the Sugar, and the Rose would all have their say. Again, the Rose Bowl has its own way of doing business, which is why it was the last bowl game to throw in with, okay, we will make this work for the sanctity of the sport because everybody else is on time with the college football playoff expansion. So the BCS is announced July 1st, 1998. And then Petitti, he was gone. He'd actually left for CBS the year before in 1997. And one of the cool notes in all of this is that, at least at the time of the story in 2006, Petitti had not attended a single BCS game. It's another way of saying he's like most executives that I know and most executives that, frankly, I adore. They do a lot of their work way in advance. And sometimes they show up to see what it is. Sometimes they don't. They're probably trying to get something else way in advance done. Now, former SEC Commissioner Roy Kramer, whose building in his name, the SEC offices, is right next to the hotel that I stay in across the street from Protective Stadium in Birmingham, had been called the father of the BCS. But he said, look, if that's the case, then Tony is the number one son. Tony is the one who did most of the legwork. LA Times had this kicker in their 2006 piece about Petitti and how the BCS was formed. And it goes like this. It's not a perfect system, as Petitti said, but it is better than what we had before. I have to say I'm proud of it. He conceded a playoff system would be better. It's the last great sporting event to be created, 2006. So this is a man that was prescient, right? Forward thinking, could understand what the public wanted and how to get, well, the stakeholders on board with what the public wanted and give it to them, right? What do we got? We got to a college football playoff from the BCS because the BCS had whetted our appetite for something more akin to, can we just get good on good? Can we wait until everybody's no longer undefeated except one team? How do we do that? College football playoff got us closer to that. Now we're expanding it to include as many teams as is necessary. And I think we're there, right? With 12. I wanted 16, but 12 is a good number because you're going to get all of your conference champions in. You're going to get your Cincinnatis that run the table that, you know, might show up to the playoff and get beat down, but everybody deserves a shot at the belt. I believe that that's all we can ask for is a chance. And that's what sports is to me. The chance to prove, right? And I think Tony Petitti becoming the Big Ten commissioner at this time is going to give more teams a chance to prove whether they know it or not, but also puts the Big Ten in the catbird seat, man. Like, for real, one of the things that was understated and underreported, frankly, about the expansion of the college football playoff model is that they still ain't ironed out the agreement on who gets what and how, right? So Petitti takes over the job in the same month where a Big Ten commissioner needed to be at the table to negotiate media rights among college football's network stakeholders. That'd be a place where I work, Fox, ESPN, CBS, NBC. You'll know that NBC has a Big Ten package that they're going to debut in 2024 when USC, UCLA join, so forth, so on. Notre Dame's going to want its seat at the table. SEC is going to do their thing. Greg Sankey's now 2 commissioners away from Roy Kramer. Mike Slive was also a big part of getting us to this point. And then George Kliavkoff and Pac-12 had come to the agreement that we got to hire this guy because we know that this is on the horizon. And now knowing that Petitti's in the room, one of the other things I thought was interesting is folk close to him say, you got about 30 seconds to tell him what it is that you want or what you think you're going to do, because that dude's probably way ahead of you. He either knows what you're going to say or wants to know why you didn't say it. And he's probably got an idea that is beneficial to you. You just can't see it. And me, I play a lot of chess, especially here lately. And one of the things that I value is not just being able to see ahead, because I don't think that too many people can see 2 or 3 moves in advance. I see chess as 64 squares. And with each movement of a piece, there are only so many pieces that you can move. And there's only so many places you can go. So it's about whether or not you're going to get there first. You're going to see something that your opponent didn't see, or you make peace with, hey, I'm going to have to sacrifice this so I get ahead in the long run. That is what Tony Petitti does so well. He sees into the future and he sets you up not for today, but for 10, 12, 15 years from now. And as the Big Ten has entered into contracts that are going to pay like $1 billion over the next 7 years, you want a guy that understands the weight of that, who understands he's got Ohio State, Michigan, USC, UCLA, Penn State, Wisconsin, goodness me, and is one of the 2 biggest conferences in all of college, especially as we're no longer sure that we're going to have an FBS model the way that we have one now with 131 teams. We're closer and closer to people going, peel off the top 40, peel off the top 30, and have them have their own league. And then let's create a separate division in between FCS and what we know of as FBS. And I think this is a great dude to have leading your conference. Well, a conference has been around since the 19th century, and who understands the value that you add and understands what your fans expect too. Home run hire there. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.